Mr. Graves, you're recognized for 93.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to ask, could y'all put that slide up? Mr. Chairman, y'all all enjoy hearing me talk about the coast of Louisiana, and by the time we finish this Congress, you're going to be as well versed as anyone on what's going on there. This is a slide showing the coast of Louisiana before Hurricane Katrina. Can you do the next slide, please? Could you do the next slide? And this is what happens after. If you can go back and do that one more time, before and after. What's happened is that National Marine Fisheries Service has come in. We are trying to come in and restore these coastal wetlands. We're trying to restore them. They are applying essential fish habitat designation to these areas that were land but eroded. So they're telling us we have to mitigate for the impact to the fisheries because these lands were eroded. And so when we come back and do wetlands, and I want to be clear, we're restoring wetlands. We're not building things. We're restoring wetlands. So when we come back and restore wetlands, they're telling us we have to mitigate for the impact to fisheries. Yet, they're not making the fish mitigate for the impact to the humans or to our wetlands. So I'll actually take a deal there if y'all want to offer it. If the fish mitigate for taking our land, we'll mitigate for taking their water. But what this amendment does is it just clarifies that in a situation like this, which is, if you read the amendment, it's pretty clear that this is a narrow application to areas that have had extraordinary land loss, that essential fish habitat does not apply to restoration activities. So that's what this amendment does. I'd be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Is there further discussion to this amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Young?
I rise in support of this amendment. His amendment will correct the problem of federal overreach in the Louisiana coastal wetlands of essential fish habitat. The state has already put millions of dollars to protect an essential fish habitat has been damaged by seawater encroachment, and now the federal government is trying to take control of changing coastline from local and state manager. Louisiana should be allowed to continue to manage and restore the coastal wetlands. This is a good amendment, and I urge a yes vote.
And just to correct, billions of dollars, not millions.
Is there further discussion? Mr. Graves, you're going to guarantee this is only about fish and not about Cajuns, right?
The blood has.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, you made a good point because we were talking yesterday. If we can designate Cajuns as fish.
That was my mistake. I didn't recognize you. It's my mistake.
Christian, how many places in Louisiana would be affected or helped, if I may, by this amendment? Is it just one?
Well, actually, if you look at the slide,
Right. It's
we're doing restoration work all over the coast. We are spending billions of dollars restoring our coast right now. So this would affect many of theirs, primarily in southeast Louisiana, but there are some other areas as well.
okay.
When you carry out restoration work, in some cases you are effectively just building wetlands. In other cases, you may have to do conveyance of fresh water or sediment. You may have to do other land type features. I would be willing to relegate this to restoration activities, but just want to be clear, and I don't know how to say this any other way. I don't have any nefarious intent here, but I do want to be clear that restoration projects do include other things such as conveyance and lands and perhaps even some gray infrastructure. Nothing that is designed to be a detriment to the environment, but I do think it's worth clarifying that. I'd be happy to work with them moving forward. I will say I would like to move forward with this amendment, though, but I will make a commitment to you. I would be happy to meet with you all and talk to you about ways of tightening this up. Thank you.
Or you can meet with him and tighten it up, not all of us here. Is there a further discussion on the amendment? Realizing we'll work on that, yeah. All those in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed say no. The amendment is agreed. Mr.
Couldn't go that easy.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Okay. There was a roll call request.
I just want to state my
Mr. Bishop.
Yes.
Mr. Bishop votes yes. Mr. Grijalva. Mr. Chairman, on this vote, the yeas are 35 and the nays are 4.
Amendment is agreed. Mr. Graves, you have the next one, number 94.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's also at your desks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Amendment number 94, what it does is currently under Magnuson-Stevens fisheries, there's a definition section that defines the term bycatch. What that says in section 3, paragraph 2, the term bycatch means fish which are harvested in a fishery but which are not sold or kept for personal use and includes economic discards and regulatory discards. Here's the relevant sentence. Such term does not include fish released alive under a recreational catch and release fishery management program. Now, whenever you go recreationally fish, you go catch salmon, you go catch whatever, and you catch and release, you throw the fish back. Under this definition, it is unclear whether or not if you take your kids out fishing, you may be required to report back your bycatch, that your catch and release is a bycatch. So all this does is this just removes the term management program to make it clear that the definition says such term does not include fish released alive under a recreational catch and release fishery. So this is just designed to prevent a scenario where recreational fishers may be required to report bycatch whenever they take their kids fishing, catch a fish, and release it. I'll say it again, no nefarious intent. In cases when I don't tell you that, it probably means I'm up to something. But this is designed, and I want to be clear that under the way this is exercised today, this is implemented today, it is implemented consistent with what our amendment does. We just want to ensure that the definition is clear moving forward, that when you go recreationally fish and release a fish, it is not subjected to a bycatch reporting requirement. Yield back.
Mr. Graves, quickly.
Mr. Chairman, just briefly want to say, I want to thank the gentleman from California. I understand your concerns. As you know, we reported a very different bill out of this committee last Congress. We did try very hard to work with environmental groups, many others to try and come to consensus. And I said this yesterday in the opening statement. The goal line was moved on us about 3 times. It's very difficult to negotiate when the goal line moves. We tried very hard. Lastly, I think it's important to put things in context. I don't know if you have that slide, but Mr. Huffman, the total fishing trips in California, on the West Coast, all 3 states on the West Coast, was about 5.5 million trips. In the Gulf Coast, it's about 20 million. There's a lot of disparity. And in the state of Alaska, Mr. Young, I think it's around 1 million. There's a lot of disparity, and I think the fishing pressures are different in different regions. And so just like your Dungeness crab, just like the striped bass, just like salmon, you tailor management strategies in some instances to the actual demand on the fisheries. I think that this is a better solution for the Gulf Coast. Certainly understand there's different solutions for the West Coast, for Alaska, and others. 2/3 of the fishing trips in the Gulf of Mexico are fishing for fish that are managed by the state, in the states, and we do it very well. We want to sustainably manage the fisheries. I look forward to working with you moving forward, and yield back.